The clock on the wall showed 9:47 p.m. when Riley finished wiping down table 12 for the second time that evening. A stubborn red wine stain had dried into the white tablecloth, and no amount of scrubbing seemed to make it disappear completely. She sighed, tossed the rag into her apron pocket, and straightened up, feeling her lower back protest with a familiar ache. 8 hours. She had been on her feet for 8 solid hours, moving between tables, balancing plates, forcing smiles even when customers snapped their fingers at her like she was invisible. This was her life now, and had been for the past 2 years since she moved to the city. Romano's Italian restaurant wasn't a bad place to work. The owner, Mr. Romano, was fair enough, and the tips were decent on weekends. But decent tips weren't going to pay for what Riley really wanted. Every night when she got home to her tiny studio apartment, she would pull out a worn notebook from under her mattress and count the money she had saved. The number grew slowly, painfully slowly, but it grew. Riley had a dream. It wasn't a complicated dream or even an unusual one. She wanted to go to music school. She wanted to study piano properly, with real teachers who could show her techniques she had never learned. She wanted to understand music theory, composition, all the things she had only taught herself through library books and free videos online. Her grandmother had given her piano lessons when she was young, before arthritis twisted her grandmother's fingers into shapes that could no longer reach the keys. Those lessons had been everything to Riley. She remembered sitting beside her grandmother on the worn piano bench, the smell of lavender perfume, the patient voice explaining where to place her fingers. When her grandmother passed away 3 years ago, Riley had inherited almost nothing except an old photo and those precious memories of music. Now, at 28 years old, Riley was still chasing that dream. Most people her age had finished college already, started careers, bought cars. But Riley had taken a different path. She had bills to pay, rent that seemed to increase every year, and a bank account that never quite had enough zeros. She counted her tips from the evening shift, separating the crumpled bills and coins on the counter near the cash register. $43.75. Not bad for a Thursday, but not great either. She had made better on Tuesday. "Riley, you heading out?" She looked up to see Tony, the line cook, poking his head through the kitchen window. His chef's hat sat crooked on his head, and there was a smear of tomato sauce on his cheek. "Yeah, just finishing up," she called back. "Long day. Tell me about it." "My feet are killing me," Riley smiled. Tony always said his feet were killing him, but he never complained beyond that. He had 3 kids at home and worked twice as many hours as she did. She had no right to complain about being tired when people like Tony kept pushing through. She was about to untie her apron when Mr. Romano came rushing out from his office, his reading glasses sliding down his nose. He looked flustered, which was unusual. Mr. Romano was normally the calmest person in the restaurant, even during the dinner rush. "Riley, you still here?" "Thank goodness," she paused, one hand on her apron strings. "Is everything okay?" "I just got a call. There's a private party coming in. They'll be here in 15 minutes. He ran a hand through his thinning gray hair. "It's Mrs. Henderson's party. You know, the Henderson family? They own half the buildings downtown." Riley nodded slowly. She had heard of the Henderson family. Everyone had. They were the kind of wealthy people who appeared in the local newspaper's society pages. "The thing is," Mr. Romano continued, looking apologetic, "Lisa just called in sick, and Marco left an hour ago. I'm short-staffed. I know you've been here all day, but could you possibly stay another hour? Just to help serve? I'll pay you extra." Riley felt her exhaustion like a weight pressing down on her shoulders. Another hour meant she wouldn't get home until after 11. It meant her feet would hurt even more tomorrow. It meant she would be too tired to practice on the keyboard in her apartment. But it also meant more money. Maybe another $30 or $40. Every bit counted. "Sure," she heard herself say. "I can stay." The relief on Mr. Romano's face was immediate. "You're a lifesaver, Riley, really. I owe you one." 20 minutes later, the Henderson party arrived. Riley counted 12 guests, all dressed in expensive-looking clothes that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The women wore silk and pearls. The men had perfectly tailored suits. They moved with the easy confidence of people who had never worried about money a day in their lives. They had reserved the back section of the restaurant, the nicer area with soft lighting and the good chairs. Riley helped set up the tables, making sure everything looked perfect. She filled water glasses, brought out fresh bread, took drink orders. As she worked, she couldn't help but notice the piano in the corner. It was an old upright piano, probably from the 1960s, with wooden panels that had darkened with age. Mr. Romano kept it there as decoration, he said. It gave the restaurant character, made it feel authentic. But Riley had never seen anyone play it. The bench was usually piled with extra napkins and menu holders. Tonight, someone had cleared off the bench. A small arrangement of flowers sat on top of the piano. Maybe Mr. Romano had done it to make the space look nice for the Henderson party. Riley tried not to stare at the piano as she served appetizers. She had a job to do, but her eyes kept drifting back to those keys, wondering if the piano was even in tune, wondering how it would sound. She was refilling wine glasses when she overheard Mrs. Henderson talking to her daughter. I specifically requested a pianist, the older woman was saying, her voice sharp with disappointment. You know how much Mother loves piano music. That's the whole point of this dinner. I know, Mom, I'm sorry, the daughter replied, looking stressed. The musician we booked called this afternoon and canceled. Something about a family emergency. I tried calling every pianist in the phone book, but it's such short notice. Well, it's ruined now. The whole evening is ruined. Riley moved away, not wanting to eavesdrop anymore, but she felt a pang of sympathy. The dinner was supposed to be a celebration for someone's 75th birthday. The elderly woman sitting at the head of the table must be the mother they were talking about. She looked frail and sweet, wearing a lavender dress and a gentle smile. As Riley brought out the main courses, she kept thinking about that piano. She wasn't a professional musician. She had never performed for anyone except her grandmother. She didn't even own a real piano, just a second-hand electronic keyboard that was missing 2 keys. But she could play. She knew she could play. Her heart started beating faster as an impossible idea formed in her mind. It was crazy. It was presumptuous. She was just a waitress. These people wouldn't want to hear someone like her play, but that elderly woman in the lavender dress deserved to have music. At her birthday dinner, Riley found Mr. Romano near the kitchen and pulled him aside. The piano, she said quietly. Does it work? Is it in tune? He looked at her with surprise. The piano? I think so, why? She took a deep breath. I can play something, if you want. I heard them say their musician canceled. Mr. Romano's eyebrows went up. You play piano? I didn't know that. My grandmother taught me. I'm not professional or anything, but I could play something simple. Just some background music, if you think it would help. He studied her face for a long moment, then glanced toward the Henderson party. She could see him calculating the risk. If she was terrible, it might make things worse. But if she was decent, it might save the evening. Okay, he finally said. But keep it soft. Just background music. Nothing too bold. Riley nodded, her hands already trembling. She hadn't even sat down at the piano yet, and already she was questioning every choice that had led to this moment. What was she thinking? But it was too late to back out now. Riley's hands wouldn't stop shaking as she walked toward the piano. She could feel every eye in the restaurant following her movements, though most of the guests were focused on their conversations and their food. Still, her heart hammered in her chest like it was trying to escape. The piano bench felt different than she expected when she sat down. It was lower than her grandmother's old bench, and the cushion had worn thin over the years. She could feel the hard wood underneath. Her waitress apron was still tied around her waist, the pocket heavy with pens and order pads. She thought about taking it off, but that seemed too formal, too presumptuous. She was still working. This was just a favor, nothing more. Riley lifted the fallboard that covered the keys. The ivory was yellowed with age, and someone had carved tiny initials into one of the upper keys, probably decades ago. She pressed middle C gently, testing it. The sound that came out was surprisingly clear. A little tinny maybe, but not bad. Not bad at all. She looked up and caught Mr. Romano watching her from across the room. He gave her a small nod of encouragement. Behind him, she could see Tony peeking through the kitchen window, curiosity written all over his face. Riley placed her fingers on the keys and tried to remember what her grandmother had taught her about posture. Straight back, relaxed shoulders, curved fingers like you're holding an orange. She had heard those instructions 1,000 times as a child. She decided to start with something simple, something her grandmother had loved. It was an old melody, the kind of tune people hummed without knowing where it came from. Nothing fancy, Nothing that would draw too much attention. The first few notes came out hesitant. Her fingers felt clumsy, unpracticed. She made a small mistake on the third measure and felt her face flush with heat. But she kept going. That's what her grandmother always said. When you make a mistake, you don't stop. You keep going like it was meant to be that way all along. Gradually, her fingers remembered what to do. Muscle memory took over where conscious thought failed. The melody began to flow more naturally, and Riley felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. At first, no one seemed to notice. The guests continued their conversations, the clinking of silverware and glasses providing a gentle percussion beneath her playing. That was fine with Riley. She didn't want to be the center of attention. She just wanted to help make the evening a little nicer for that sweet woman in the lavender dress. But then something shifted. Riley wasn't sure exactly when it happened, but she became aware that the conversation at the Henderson table had grown quieter. She kept her eyes on the keys, not wanting to look up, not wanting to see if people were watching her or judging her playing. She finished the first song and immediately moved into another one, not wanting to create an awkward silence. This one was a lullaby, something soft and gentle. Her grandmother used to sing it while she played. That's beautiful. The voice came from beside her, and Riley's fingers stumbled over the keys in surprise. She looked up to find the elderly woman in the lavender dress standing next to the piano. Up close, Riley could see the woman's eyes were misty with tears. "I'm sorry," Riley said quickly, stopping her playing. "I didn't mean to intrude on your party." Mr. Romano said, No, please don't apologize." The woman reached out and gently touched Riley's shoulder. "That song. My mother used to sing that to me when I was a little girl. I haven't heard it in 40 years. Riley felt a lump forming in her throat. "My grandmother sang it too." The woman smiled, and it transformed her whole face. "Would you play it again? Just once more?" "Of course." This time Riley played it slower, pouring everything she had into each note. She thought about her grandmother, about sitting beside her on the piano bench, about the way music had the power to connect people across time and distance. When she finished, the woman squeezed her shoulder gently. "Thank you, dear. You've given me such a gift tonight." As the woman returned to her table, Riley noticed something. The entire restaurant had gone quiet. Not just the Henderson party, but all the other diners too. Everyone had stopped eating, stopped talking. They were all listening to her. The realization should have terrified her. A few minutes ago it would have. But something had changed. That moment with the elderly woman had reminded Riley why music mattered. It wasn't about being perfect or professional. It was about connection. It was about touching something deep inside people that words couldn't reach. So Riley kept playing. She moved through the songs she knew by heart, the ones she had practiced on her cheap keyboard late at night when she couldn't sleep. But something strange started happening. Her fingers began to drift away from the memorized notes. They started exploring, finding new pathways across the keys. She added a small flourish here, a different chord progression there. She wove in fragments of other songs, blending them together in ways she had never tried before. It was like her hands had a mind of their own, and they were telling a story she didn't even know she had inside her. Riley closed her eyes and just let it happen. She thought about everything that had led her to this moment. The long shifts at the restaurant, the aching feet and the difficult customers, the counting of tips and the slow growth of her savings account, the dream that seemed so far away sometimes, the memory of her grandmother's patient voice, the years of practice on a keyboard that wasn't even a real piano. All of it poured out through her fingers onto those yellowed keys. She played sadness and hope. She played exhaustion and determination. She played the feeling of being invisible in a room full of people who never really saw you. And she played the moment when someone finally does see you, really see you, and acknowledges that you matter. The music swelled and softened, danced and mourned, laughed and cried. Riley had no idea how long she played. Time seemed to disappear. There was only the piano and the music and the feeling of being completely, utterly alive. When her hands finally came to rest on the keys, when the last note faded into silence, Riley opened her eyes. The restaurant erupted in applause. The sound startled her so much she nearly fell off the bench. Every single person in Romano's was standing, clapping enthusiastically. The Henderson family, the other diners, even Mr. Romano and Tony, who had come out from the kitchen. Their faces were bright with genuine appreciation. Riley felt her cheeks burning. She didn't know what to do with her hands. She tried to stand up, but her legs felt shaky. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was just supposed to play some quiet background music and then go back to clearing tables. That was incredible. Someone called out, "Where did you learn to play like that?" Another voice asked. Riley mumbled something about her grandmother, about it being nothing special, about needing to get back to work. She started to stand, to escape back to the familiar safety of taking orders and refilling water glasses. But then a man approached her. He was maybe in his 40s, wearing an expensive suit and designer glasses. He had been sitting at one of the side tables, she realized, though she hadn't noticed him before. There was something about the way he carried himself, the way he moved with purpose toward her. "Excuse me," he said, pulling a business card from his pocket. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have to talk to you. My name is David Chen, and I produce documentaries about music and musicians." Riley took the card automatically, not really processing what he was saying. Her brain was still catching up to what had just happened. "I've been working on a project about undiscovered talent," he continued, his voice excited. "I've been searching for months for the right person to feature, and I just found her. You. That performance was remarkable. Genuinely remarkable." Riley stared at him, then at the business card, then back at him. "I'm sorry. I think you have me confused with someone else. I'm just a waitress. I don't have any formal training. I just play for fun. That's exactly what makes it special," he said. "Do you have any idea how rare it is to hear someone play with that much raw emotion? That much authenticity? Most trained musicians spend years trying to reconnect with what you just did naturally." The elderly woman in lavender had joined them now, her daughter beside her. "You simply must let this young man help you," she said to Riley. "Talent like yours shouldn't be hidden away." Riley looked around at all the faces watching her expectantly. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. Riley stood in her tiny apartment at 2 a.m, still wearing her waitress uniform. She hadn't been able to sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the applause again, saw the faces of all those people watching her, felt the weight of that business card in her pocket. David Chen, documentary producer. The card listed a phone number, an email address, and a company name she had never heard of, but that sounded important and official. She pulled the card out again and stared at it under the dim light of her kitchen lamp. Part of her wanted to believe this was real. But the larger part, the practical part that had learned not to trust easy promises, kept whispering that it was probably nothing. People said things in the moment. They got excited and made offers they didn't really mean. By morning, she had convinced herself that David Chen had probably forgotten all about her already. But at 9 o'clock, her phone rang. "Unknown number. Hello? Hi, is this Riley? This is David Chen. We met last night at Romano's." Her heart jumped into her throat. "Oh, yes, hi. I hope I'm not calling too early. Listen, I meant everything I said last night. I'd really like to talk to you about being part of my documentary project. Would you have time to meet for coffee today? I'd love to explain more about what I'm working on." Riley looked around her apartment. She had a shift at the restaurant starting at 3. Her laundry was piled on the only chair she owned. She hadn't washed her hair in 2 days. Sure. I could meet this morning." They agreed on a coffee shop downtown, one of those trendy places Riley had walked past 100 times but never gone into because a single cup of coffee cost more than she liked to spend. When she arrived, David was already there, sitting at a corner table with a laptop open in front of him. "Thanks for coming," he said, standing to shake her hand.
"Can I get you something?"
"Coffee? Tea? Just coffee is fine, black." He ordered for both of them, insisting on paying, and then they sat down. Riley felt completely out of place in her jeans and old sweater, surrounded by people typing on expensive laptops and having important-sounding phone conversations. "So, let me tell you what I'm working on," David began, pulling up something on his laptop screen. "For the past 2 years, I've been developing a documentary series called Hidden Voices. The concept is simple. I travel around finding people with extraordinary talent who've never had the opportunity to pursue it professionally. People who are working regular jobs, living regular lives, but who have this incredible gift that the world hasn't seen yet." Riley nodded slowly, sipping her coffee. It was actually really good coffee, she had to admit. "I've filmed segments with a construction worker who writes poetry, a taxi driver who's a classically trained opera singer, A grocery store clerk who creates these amazing paintings, David continued. But I've been looking for someone with musical talent, specifically piano, for months. And then last night I walked into Romano's to grab dinner and there you were. But I'm not that good, Riley said quickly. I mean, I've never performed professionally. I don't even own a real piano. I have a keyboard with 2 broken keys. That's exactly the point, David said, leaning forward with enthusiasm. Do you know how many technically perfect pianists are out there? Thousands. They all play the same way. Hit the same notes exactly right. Follow the same patterns they learned in music school. But what you did last night, that was different. That came from somewhere real. Riley wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, feeling the warmth seep into her fingers. What would this documentary involve? I'd like to film a segment about you. Interview you about your background, your grandmother teaching you, why you never pursued music professionally. I'd film you playing, obviously. And then, if you're interested, I'd like to help connect you with some resources. I know several music schools that offer scholarships for adult learners. I know people in the industry who help fund education for talented musicians who need financial support. It sounded too good to be true. Riley had learned that when things sounded too good to be true, they usually were. Why would you do all this? She asked. What do you get out of it? David smiled. Fair question, honestly. I get a good story for my documentary, but more than that, I get to help someone. I grew up poor. My parents were immigrants who worked 3 jobs between them just to keep food on the table. When I got interested in filmmaking as a teenager, I thought it was an impossible dream, but someone gave me a chance. A teacher who let me use the school's camera equipment, a local filmmaker who took me on as an unpaid intern. Those people changed my life. This is my way of paying that forward. Riley felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them back quickly. I don't know what to say. You don't have to decide right now, David said. Think about it. But I want you to know this is a real opportunity. I'm not some scam artist. You can look up my work online. I've done 3 seasons of this show already. It airs on a streaming platform. I can send you links. They talked for another hour. David showed her clips from previous episodes of his documentary. He explained how the filming process would work. He answered every question she had, and there were many. By the time Riley left the coffee shop, her head was spinning with possibilities. Over the next week, David sent her information about music schools. He connected her with a woman named Patricia, who ran a nonprofit that provided scholarships for adult students pursuing arts education. Patricia called Riley and talked to her for almost 2 hours, asking about her background, her goals, her financial situation. We have a scholarship that would cover full tuition, Patricia explained. It's competitive, but based on what David showed me of your playing, I think you'd have a strong chance. You'd need to submit an application, including a video of you performing. A video. Riley's cheap keyboard with its 2 broken keys flashed through her mind. But Patricia reassured her that the quality of the recording didn't matter. They wanted to see the talent, not professional production value. Mr. Romano, when Riley told him about the opportunity, was immediately supportive. Use the piano at the restaurant, he said. Come in on your day off and record whatever you need. The place is yours. Riley spent 3 days working on her application. She practiced for hours on the restaurant piano when the place was closed. Tony came in on his day off just to film her on his phone because Riley's phone was too old to record decent video. You got this, Tony said, holding the phone steady. Just play like you did that night. Play from your heart. Riley recorded 5 different songs. She threw out the first 4 attempts because she kept making mistakes, kept getting in her own head about it. But on the 5th try, something clicked. She forgot about the camera, forgot about the application, forgot about everything except the music. When she finally submitted the application, she felt nauseous with anxiety. The scholarship committee would review applications for the next month, Patricia had said. Riley might not hear back for 6 weeks. Those 6 weeks were the longest of Riley's life. She kept working her shifts at Romano's. She kept saving her tips just in case. She tried not to think about the application, tried not to get her hopes up. But it was impossible not to imagine what it would be like. Real music school. Real teachers. The chance to actually pursue her dream instead of just working toward it in stolen moments. David stayed in touch, checking in every few days. He had already started filming some background footage at the restaurant, interviewing Mr. Romano and Tony about what kind of employee Riley was, What kind of person? He filmed the exterior of her apartment building, the bus stop where she waited every morning, the details of her daily life. Whatever happens with the scholarship, I'm still making this segment, he told her. Your story matters whether you get into music school or not. But Riley desperately wanted it. She wanted it more than she had wanted anything in her entire life. When her phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon, showing Patricia's name on the caller ID, Riley almost didn't answer. She was too scared. What if it was bad news? What if they had rejected her application? She took a deep breath and answered, Riley, it's Patricia. I have some news for you. Riley closed her eyes, her hand gripping the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. The scholarship committee reviewed your application, Patricia continued. And Riley, they were blown away. They want to offer you a full scholarship to the Riverside Conservatory of Music, full tuition, plus a stipend for living expenses. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Riley sat down hard on her couch, unable to speak. Riley, are you there? I'm here, she managed to whisper. Did you just say full scholarship? Full scholarship, Patricia confirmed, and Riley could hear the smile in her voice. You did it. You're going to music school. Riley couldn't stop shaking. She sat on her couch, phone still pressed against her ear, listening to Patricia explain the details of the scholarship. But the words seemed to float past her like bubbles. Full scholarship. Riverside Conservatory, starting in the fall semester. After she hung up, Riley just sat there in silence for what felt like hours but was probably only 10 minutes. Then she started crying. Not sad tears, but the overwhelming kind that comes when something so big happens that your body doesn't know what else to do with all the emotions. She called Mr. Romano first. I got it, she said when he answered, her voice breaking. The scholarship. I got it. She could hear the smile in his voice. Riley, that's wonderful. I knew you would. When do you start? September. 3 months from now. Well, you just made my whole week. Actually, my whole year. I'm so proud of you, kid. After that call, Riley sat with her phone in her hands, thinking about who else to tell. She didn't have much family. No siblings. Her parents had passed away years ago. Her grandmother was gone. She had a few friends, but none she was particularly close to. Her life had been so consumed with work and saving money that she hadn't left much room for relationships. That realization made her feel lonely for a moment. But then she remembered Tony and the other people at the restaurant who had become something like family over the past 2 years. David called her that evening, excited about filming her reaction to the news. This is perfect timing, he said. The documentary is really coming together. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something. Would you be comfortable if we released a short clip of your performance online? Just a minute or two to build interest before the full documentary comes out. Riley hesitated. Online, like on social media? Yeah, just a preview. I think people would really connect with your story, but only if you're comfortable with it. This is your story, so you get final say. Riley thought about it. A few months ago, the idea would have terrified her, but something had shifted inside her since that night at Romano's. She had spent so much of her life trying to be invisible, trying not to take up space. Maybe it was time to be seen. Okay, she said. You can post it. David uploaded the clip 2 days later. It was 1 minute and 30 seconds of Riley playing at the restaurant, intercut with a brief title card explaining that she was a waitress who had taught herself piano and had just received a scholarship to music school. The video ended with a link to follow for the full documentary. Riley didn't think much would happen. Maybe a few hundred people would watch it. Maybe a few of David's followers would click like and move on. She was wrong. The video went viral within 48 hours. Riley woke up one morning to find her phone flooded with notifications. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. The video had been shared across multiple platforms. People were commenting, sending messages, sharing their own stories about hidden dreams and delayed opportunities. This made me cry at my desk at work. One comment read, I gave up on my dreams 20 years ago. Maybe it's not too late, wrote another. This is what real talent looks like. No fancy equipment, no expensive training. Just pure heart. The numbers kept climbing. 10,000 views, 50,000, 100,000. By the end of the week, the video had been watched over 2 million times. Riley felt completely overwhelmed. She had wanted to be seen, yes, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. Suddenly everyone wanted to interview her. Local news stations called. Online magazines reached out. A morning talk show invited her to appear as a guest. "I don't know how to do any of this," she told David in a panic. "I'm not a public speaker. I'm not a performer. I'm just someone who plays piano." "That's exactly why people love you," David said calmly. "You're real. You're authentic. Just be yourself and everything else will follow." The talk show appearance was terrifying. Riley sat in a chair under bright studio lights, wearing a dress she had borrowed from one of the other waitresses at Romano's because she didn't own anything nice enough for television. The host was friendly, but Riley's hands wouldn't stop trembling. "So tell us," the host said. "What went through your mind when you sat down at that piano?" Riley took a breath. "Honestly, I was thinking that my feet hurt and I just wanted to go home. But there was this elderly woman having her 75th birthday, and she wanted music. And I just thought maybe I could help make her night a little better. And now here you are, about to attend one of the best music conservatories in the country. How does that feel?"
It feels like a dream.
Riley said honestly. "Like I'm going to wake up any moment and be back to my regular life. Well, it's not a dream. This is really happening, and I have a surprise for you." Riley's stomach dropped. She hated surprises on television. But before she could protest, a curtain at the side of the stage opened, and there was the elderly woman from Romano's, the birthday guest, walking out with a huge smile on her face. Riley stood up automatically, almost knocking over her chair. "I had to come," the woman said, giving Riley a warm hug. "When I saw your video online, I cried all over again. What you did for me that night meant more than you know, and I wanted to do something for you." The woman pulled an envelope from her purse and handed it to Riley. "This is from my family and me. It's not much, but we wanted to help with your expenses while you're in school. Books, supplies, whatever you need." Riley opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a check for $10,000. She tried to speak but couldn't find words. The audience applauded. The host had tears in her eyes. Riley just stood there holding the check, overwhelmed by the kindness of near strangers. After the show, things got even more surreal. A crowdfunding campaign started by some of Riley's fans raised an additional $15,000 within a week. A piano company offered to donate an upright piano to her apartment. A local music store said she could have any books and sheet music she needed, free of charge. "I don't understand why people are being so generous," Riley said to David one afternoon. They were at the restaurant, filming more footage for the documentary. "I haven't done anything to deserve all this. You inspired them," David said simply. "You reminded people that it's never too late to chase a dream. That's powerful, Riley. People need hope right now, and you gave them that." The remaining months before school started passed in a blur. Riley kept working at Romano's, but now customers would sometimes recognize her. Some would ask for photos. Others would share their own stories about dreams they had given up or were thinking about pursuing again. One regular customer, an older man who came in every Thursday for the meatball special, stopped Riley one evening. "I used to paint," he said quietly. 40 years ago, before I got a real job and responsibilities. I gave it up. But after seeing your video, I went out and bought art supplies. I've been painting again for the first time in decades. I just wanted to say thank you." Those moments made everything real for Riley. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone who had ever been told their dreams were impractical, who had ever felt too old or too poor or too unqualified to pursue what they loved. As September approached, Riley started packing up her tiny apartment. She would be moving into student housing at the conservatory, a small dorm room that she would share with another student. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers. It was the beginning of everything she had worked toward. The night before she left, Mr. Romano threw a small party at the restaurant. Tony made her favorite pasta dish. The regular customers showed up. Even some of the Henderson family came, including the elderly woman who had started it all. "Play us one more song," Mr. Romano said, gesturing to the piano. "Before you go off and become famous." Riley sat at the piano one last time, the piano that had changed her life. She played the same song her grandmother had taught her all those years ago, the simple melody that had started everything. But this time she played it with confidence, with gratitude, with the knowledge that sometimes the smallest actions can create the biggest changes. When she finished, everyone applauded, but it was different from that first night. These weren't strangers anymore. These were people who had become her family, who had supported her journey, who had believed in her even when she struggled to believe in herself. Tomorrow, she would start a new chapter. But tonight, she was exactly where she needed to be. The first day at Riverside Conservatory felt like stepping into a different world. Riley walked through the main entrance carrying 2 suitcases and a backpack, looking up at the high ceilings and the walls lined with portraits of famous composers. Students hurried past her, many of them carrying instrument cases and talking about pieces she had never heard of. Everyone seemed so young. Most of the other students were 18, fresh out of high school, with their whole lives ahead of them. Riley was 28, nearly a decade older than most of her classmates. She felt out of place in a way that had nothing to do with skill and everything to do with experience. Her roommate was a girl named Jessica, 19 years old, who had been playing piano since she was 4. Jessica came from a family of musicians and had attended a prestigious performing arts high school. She was friendly enough, but Riley could tell Jessica wasn't quite sure what to make of her. "So you're the viral video girl," Jessica said, not unkindly, as she helped Riley unpack. "That must be so weird." "It is," Riley admitted. "Sometimes I still can't believe any of this is real." The first few weeks were harder than Riley had expected. The other students had years of formal training. They could sight-read complex pieces effortlessly. They knew music theory inside and out. They used terms and talked about techniques that Riley had never encountered. In her piano class, Riley struggled to keep up. Her teacher, Professor Mitchell, was a stern woman in her 60s who had performed in concert halls around the world. She would assign pieces and expect students to master them within a week. Riley would spend hours practicing, her fingers cramping, her back aching from sitting at the piano bench so long. "You have raw talent," Professor Mitchell told her after one particularly frustrating lesson. "But talent alone isn't enough. You need discipline. You need to understand the technical foundations. Right now you're like someone who knows how to run but has never learned proper form. You can move fast, but you're going to hurt yourself eventually." Riley wanted to argue, wanted to defend herself, but she knew the professor was right. She had spent years teaching herself, developing bad habits that now needed to be unlearned. It was humbling and exhausting. Some nights Riley would lie in bed listening to Jessica practice difficult pieces flawlessly on her keyboard with headphones and wonder if she had made a terrible mistake. Maybe she didn't belong here. Maybe she should have just kept her regular life, kept playing piano as a hobby, kept things simple. But then she would remember that elderly woman's face at Romano's. She would remember all the messages from people saying her story had inspired them. She would remember why she had wanted this in the first place, so she kept going. Riley developed a routine. She would wake up at 6 every morning and practice for 2 hours before classes. She would go to all her lectures, take detailed notes, ask questions even when she felt stupid for not knowing the answers. After classes, she would practice for another 3 hours. On weekends, when other students went to parties or socialized, Riley would be in one of the practice rooms working on her technique, drilling scales, studying theory. Slowly, things started to click. The technical exercises that had seemed pointless began to make sense. Her fingers learned the proper positions. Her sight reading improved. She started understanding why certain chord progressions worked, why some rhythms felt more natural than others. Professor Mitchell noticed the improvement. "You're working harder than any student I've had in 5 years, she said one day, a hint of approval in her voice. That counts for something. 3 months into the semester, Riley had her first recital. She was terrified. The conservatory held student performances every few weeks, and attendance was mandatory for all music students. Riley would be performing in front of 200 people who knew far more about piano than she did. She chose to play one of the pieces her grandmother had taught her, but arranged with the new techniques she had learned. It was a risk, blending her old style with her new training, but it felt right. It felt like honoring where she came from while showing where she was going. The night of the recital, Riley's hands shook as she walked onto the stage. The auditorium was packed. She could see Jessica in the 3rd row, and Professor Mitchell sitting near the back with her arms crossed. David was there too with his camera, documenting this moment for the final episode of his documentary. Riley sat at the grand piano, so much nicer than the old upright at Romano's. She took a deep breath, placed her fingers on the keys, and began to play. At first she was nervous, hitting a few notes too hard, rushing through a passage. But then something familiar happened. The world fell away. There was only the music. She forgot about the audience, forgot about being judged, forgot about everything except the conversation she was having with the piano. She played with technical precision now. Yes, but she didn't lose the emotion that had made her performance at Romano's special. She had found a way to blend the two, to be both skilled and soulful. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. Then the applause came, strong and genuine. Students were standing. Professor Mitchell was nodding with what might have been a smile. Riley felt tears prick her eyes, but this time she didn't try to hide them. After the recital, several students approached her. Some wanted to know how she practiced. Others wanted to share their own struggles with feeling behind or out of place. One student, a violinist, told her that watching Riley work so hard had inspired him to stop complaining about his own challenges. "You remind us why we're all here," he said. "It's easy to forget when you've been doing this your whole life. But you chose this. You fought for this. That means something." The full documentary premiered 2 weeks later. David had titled the episode "The Waitress and the Piano." It followed Riley's entire journey, from that first night at Romano's through her struggles and triumphs at the conservatory. The final scene showed her playing at her recital, with text on screen explaining what had happened since. The response was overwhelming. The documentary episode was watched millions of times. News outlets picked up the story again. Riley did more interviews, but this time she felt more comfortable, more confident in her own skin. But the most meaningful response came from unexpected places. Riley started receiving letters and emails from people around the world. A 50-year-old woman wrote to say she had enrolled in college for the first time. A man in his 60s said he had picked up his old guitar. A single mother wrote that she was finally pursuing her dream of becoming a teacher. "You showed us it's never too late," the letter said. "You gave us permission to try." Riley kept every single letter. As the semester continued, Riley found her place at the conservatory. She would never be the most technically skilled student, and that was okay. She brought something different to her music, something born from years of longing and late-night practice on a broken keyboard, and the memory of her grandmother's patient hands. But Riley made one important decision. Once a week, every Thursday evening, she would leave campus and take the bus back to her old neighborhood. She would walk into Romano's still wearing her conservatory sweatshirt, and she would work a shift as a waitress. Mr. Romano had told her she didn't need to, that she should focus on school, but Riley insisted. "This place changed my life," she said. "I don't want to forget that. I don't want to lose touch with where I came from." And after her shift, after the tables were cleared and the last customers had left, Riley would sit at that old upright piano. Sometimes she would play the complex pieces she was learning at school. Sometimes she would play the simple melodies her grandmother had taught her. And sometimes customers would stay late just to listen, their dinners growing cold, their conversations pausing. The piano had been tuned and restored, thanks to donations from people who had seen the documentary. It gleamed now, the keys no longer yellowed, the sound clear and bright. Mr. Romano had placed a small plaque on it that read, "Where Dreams Begin." Riley would run her fingers over that plaque before she played, remembering the exhausted waitress she had been just months ago. That version of herself felt both very close and very far away. One Thursday evening, as Riley finished playing, a young woman approached her. She looked nervous, probably in her early 20s, wearing the uniform of the coffee shop down the street. "I'm sorry to bother you," the woman said, "but I just wanted to say thank you. I've been writing poetry for years, but I never showed anyone. After I saw your story, I finally signed up for an open mic night. I read my poems in public for the first time last week." Riley smiled and took the woman's hand. "How did it feel?" "Terrifying," the woman said, then laughed. "But also amazing. Like I was finally being honest about who I am." "That's exactly right," Riley said. "Keep going. Keep being honest. The world needs your voice." As the woman left, Riley looked around Romano's. This restaurant, this piano, this moment that had seemed so small at the time, had rippled outward in ways she never could have imagined. She hadn't just changed her own life. She had reminded people everywhere that dreams don't have expiration dates, that it's never too late to become who you were meant to be. Riley sat back down at the piano and played one more song before heading back to campus. It was the lullaby her grandmother used to sing, the one that had brought tears to that elderly woman's eyes all those months ago. As she played, Riley thought about all the people listening, all the dreams being born in quiet moments, all the courage it takes to simply try. And she played on, knowing that somewhere, someone was hearing this music and thinking, maybe I can do it too. Maybe it's not too late for me. That thought made every difficult day, every cramped finger, every moment of doubt completely worth it.